Denounced as a sham, Myanmar's junta holds its first election in 5 years. In the midst of armed conflict that many describe as civil war, the voting will be staged over weeks. But with little or no opposition on the ballot, what does the junta really gain from this controversial vote? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is Myanmar's election. Under pressure from abroad, Myanmar's military generals are holding what they call an election, but human rights observers call a sham. With most of the last 5 years spent under a state of emergency, most opposition figures behind bars or in exile, and large parts of the country effectively at war with the junta, conditions for anything resembling a fair election would be impossible to meet. Still, the process is underway. So to what end? Here's a look.
With sweeping restrictions and a civil war raging, Myanmar's junta holds elections. They're the first since the army overthrew the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi nearly 5 years ago. Since then, 40 political parties have been dissolved, including Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, and many politicians are either behind bars or in exile. The authorities have also enacted a draconian law that criminalises any criticism towards the polls, and they've arrested more than 200 people. 25% of the parliamentary seats are reserved for the military, and most of the parties on the ballot are either junta-backed or junta-linked. Among them, the Union Solidarity and Development Party is running with the most candidates and is favourite to win.
This is not about public consultation. This is about engineering an outcome where the military's favoured party wins a landslide. This will enable them to shift from direct military rule back to semi-civilian or quasi-civilian rule.
That's also how many countries and the United Nations have described the vote, neither free nor fair. But the junta has dismissed criticism.
The election is being held for Myanmar. It's being held for the people of Myanmar. It's not being held for the international community. Therefore, those who want to criticize may criticize. We, however, will proceed to achieve our original objective, which is to return to a multi-party democratic system.
In reality, the vote won't even cover the whole country. The three-stage election will take place in less than 2/3 of Myanmar, as vast swathes are still under rebel control. In recent months, the military has managed to retake some territory, including the strategic town of Kyaukme. It has done so largely through heavy air and drone strikes, targeting civilians, schools and medical facilities. Earlier this month, the military bombed a hospital in Rakhine State. At least 34 people were killed, including patients and health workers.
This is an inhuman act. It is vile and violent. The military council, which has been losing the war for a long time, is jealous of the people. They are targeting the people in retaliation for their defeat. They are saying they will hold elections. Even at this time, they're brutally killing the people.
Despite international pressure and sanctions, the suffering continues. Many now say the elections are a tool for the junta to legitimize its rule on the global stage and to cement support from its main allies, Russia and China. But the vote is still unlikely to end the fighting and the pro-democracy movement. Myanmar's exiled opposition, the National Unity Government, and armed resistance groups have urged voters to boycott the polls, which they say are only designed to entrench military power.
Min Aung Hlaing and the junta members intended to have their election to save themselves from the crimes they've committed. Their election can be assumed as not only fake and a fraud, but it is also a blood-stained scheme. That's why we don't accept it.
5 years ago, the world was celebrating Myanmar's journey to democracy under Aung San Suu Kyi. Today, these elections reflect a country that's broken on so many levels.
So even if these elections are neither free nor fair, will they somehow legitimize the military junta's rule? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Berkshire in the UK, Burmese scholar and co-founder of Forces of Renewal Southeast Asia, Maung Zarni. From Frankfurt, Germany, co-founder of the Free Rohingya Coalition, San Lwin. And from London, president of the Burmese Rohingya organization UK, Tun Kin. Thanks all so much for being with me. So as was said, nothing really about the election meets, any international standard for fairness, but the military seems to think it can somehow legitimize itself through this exercise. So Tun Kin, can it?
I think they will try their best. This is what they're trying to do since the coup of 2021. Military is trying to get international acceptance, and this is a sham and illegal election. They're trying to do international acceptance is needed, and they are controlling 25% almost of the country. So they are trying to get something like 2011 so-called reform way. They're trying to go that pattern, but I don't think it will work this time because the resistance is more than 75%. They're taking control, and compared with before, this military Maung Zarni regime is committing genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Of course, Rohingya people were facing genocide as a whole country. Now they're facing crimes committed by this military regime every day. They arrested thousands of political prisoners. They might show that they might release some political prisoners, and they want to lift up some sanctions. They want to gain that kind of legitimacy from international community. But as far as I think, it will not work. And this is the military regime leader who have arrest warrant from Rohingya genocide. Also, we have to remember that from Argentinian judiciary court. So he is one of the most wanted men who committed genocide for the Rohingya people and crimes committed against all the people of Burma.
Okay, San Lwin, I can't imagine you disagree with that, but the election then will somehow perversely serve the military's interest here. To what extent, though, do you really think it legitimizes the military? And whose interest does that actually serve other than the junta itself?
Well, there are the government still handing, their ambassador credential, and also the UN organization. They have been closely working with this military junta. Now, after the election, what we are worrying is they will legitimize more. More country will recognize this military, and they will do business as usual. That is precisely we are worried about. And in the country, as my colleague Tonkin mentioned, the large territory are controlling by the resistant forces, and the majority of the people, they don't like this military at all. They want to bring back the democracy in the country, but it is not going to happen anytime soon. It will take a lot of time because these resistant forces, of course, that they have the support from the international community, but still they lack the official recognition. So from the ASEAN side also, there are some significant they're blocking the leader from attending the high-level meeting. This should continue, and the Western government is always saying that this ASEAN should solve this problem. So ASEAN should continue dealing with all resistant forces, opposition parties, and the civil society. All with this, they should continue.
Yeah, Maung Zarni, ASEAN had actually said less than a year ago that the junta needs to make peace a priority rather than an election its priority. It has definitely not achieved peace in the country. So what role should ASEAN be playing, or at least saying, about this election now?
Well, the problem is ASEAN itself. ASEAN is divided over Myanmar and cannot do anything without absolute consensus within its 10-member bloc. Andrea, another problem is that the junta no longer controls the entire territories of Myanmar and all the strategic border regions with all neighbors, including the two most important neighbors, the China and India, are in the hands of the ethnic minority armed resistance organizations. The country has plunged into deep and pervasive poverty because of the ongoing civil war, and the junta doesn't have any representation at the General Assembly of the United Nations or the Human Rights Council based in Geneva. So the junta is holding the elections for making cosmetic changes and to appease the the need for China, India, and even ASEAN to show some signs of impression of stability. That's what it's doing. And the junta controls the major urban and commercial centers where international organizations and companies and diplomatic missions are based. And the majority of the country of ethnic minorities and democratic resistance are based in less, urban centers. So in that context, these elections are happening, and the elections will not address the long-standing need of peace and stability and resolution of political conflict.
Okay. Let me go back to Tun Kin, because ASEAN may be divided, but there's also China and Russia that, separately from ASEAN, have really just been Myanmar's lifeline. You know, they support the business and the industry that have been sanctioned by most other major economies. So tell us how a sham election could still benefit them.
One thing is very clear that China is always looking at their investment for their interests. They want to keep military regime in control, and China is, to be honest, playing all the besides the some also Northern Alliance revolutionary groups, but they are pressuring them. We can see right now so the way China wants is their benefit is guaranteed, and earlier we have seen China is a bit silent after the coup, but now this election is particularly supported by China and Russia, these two superpower. So military taking advantage on that, and military trying to be very good to the China, and so they go in quite good, better relation than before. So one thing we have to remember that, of course, China, Russia will support it, we can see, but that is important that international community, other Western powers and ASEAN and others, they have to reject, and they have to continue pressure to the military to stop violence, to stop these crimes. And of course, here I want to bring that ASEAN have a key role to play. There is 5 points plan. That 5 points plan have mentioned that inclusive dialogue and stop the violence and involvement of all ethnic groups, all EROs to have a dialogue. This kind of issues, but they violating even ASEAN mandate, ASEAN rules. So ASEAN have to play a key role here,
right?
Although other countries.
So, San Lwin, obviously, the international community increasing pressure on the junta would be incredibly helpful for those who want a freer, fairer election and a democracy return to their country. But in the meantime, you have countries like the United States lifting temporary protected status for what they call Burmese nationals, saying the country is now safe. they've even cited that this election serves to prove that democracy is somehow returning. So where does that leave political dissidents? And what does it say in particular about the Rohingya that you speak for?
Well, that is really a big problem for us, since the U.S., the statement is completely opposite to the ground situation. And for the Rohingya, it makes no difference at all, because the territory, the Rohingya territory, are now controlling by the Arakan army, the rebel group. They have gained the control since last year, but while they are controlling the territory, this group also, the Arakan army, killed more than 2,500 Rohingya last year, and that they pushed at least 150,000 to Bangladesh. And another 130,000 are confined into the camp in the state capital since 2012. They are still in the camp. So we have been, since the 1935, when the British separated Burma from the British India, we have been exercising voting right and the electing right. That disenfranchised in 2015. So as of now, we don't have the voting right, or even we have about the 400,000 remaining in the Rakhine states. At least 130,000 are under control of this military junta. They have no voting right, they have no electing right. So this election is not going to make any difference for us.
Okay. Maung Zarni, let me ask you, though, the same question, really, because the Department of Homeland Security in the United States says that Burma has made notable progress, and I'm quoting them, they call the country Burma. Burma has made notable progress in governance and stability, including the end of its state of emergency, plans for free and fair elections, successful ceasefire agreements, and improved local governance, contributing to enhanced public service delivery and national reconciliation. Does that hold up, in your opinion?
Not at all. I mean, Andrea, I lived in the United States for 17 years, and the U.S. itself is massively backsliding in terms of civil liberties, democratic rights, and as you know, Donald Trump's paramilitary group, ICE, is terrorizing millions of the citizens and legal residents, and not to mention asylum seekers in the United States. And so I think, like, here, what we need to understand is that Myanmar elections are being held in the next few days, phased, until January, against the backdrop of, a global decline in any type of democracies, even in the so-called liberal Western democracies. And so this is really, really worrying. As San Lwin said, the genocide of Myanmar Rohingyas hasn't ended. It continues. It transformed into something else with the new killers, Arakan army of the Buddhist nationalists, a major Islamophobic armed organization that controls the Western Myanmar today. And so it's a bit like, portraying Myanmar as some kind of like a democratic country in the middle of genocide. It's very much like, portraying Israel as a democracy while it continues to be colonial occupier and genocide perpetrator.
Yeah, so Tun Kin, I mean, how do you feel about that? Because now you have China inadvertently, we can argue, supporting the junta for its own mostly economic interests, and then you have the United States saying that it's a safe country for asylum seekers to return to. And then 4 months ago as well, we also had the U.S. lift some sanctions on certain businesses that had been working with the junta. So what chance do the democratic forces within Myanmar, including the NLD, have to ever come back to represent their people if this is the stance of basically the two most powerful countries in the world?
One thing is, first thing, NLD or National Unity Government, they need to show the willingness, embracing all ethnic groups of Burma, including the Rohingya, their willingness and how inclusive future federal union they will be exercised, how inclusive they consider it. For example, they call our name the Rohingya. We have not seen from any national unity government the fully acceptance of the Rohingya people as an ethnic group and as a full citizen of Burma. One thing from that side. Of course, Western countries, US, I can't see under Trump anything anything pressure to this regime, because Trump has his own interests as far as we can see other countries, the way how he is dealing. So one thing we can't expect, but we need to pressure US continuously not to lift sanctions and pressure in this regime. And China, Russia, they will play their own game, but we still need to push from ASEAN and European Union and other countries. One thing, what I can see here is the young people of Burma, the people of Burma are fighting. They risking their lives fighting against this military regime. If international community support 1% of Ukraine, how they supporting, our revolution will win in Burma. But we can't see any support. We can see only lip service. So the people of Burma, they need to exercise their own, their own determination. But people of Burma, young people of Burma are fighting. We need on support on that and pressuring diplomatically. At the same
San
time,
Lwin,
we're
really running out of time. The clock is very much against us. So let me get San Lwin back into the discussion here, because if this is the stance of the international community, two major powers are not backing any kind of democratic forces in Myanmar. We're looking at the armed conflict as well that is on the ground, and the potential for, as it's been called, the balkanization of the country going forward, with or without an election. Is that an overriding force right now in Myanmar? Is that what you fear?
Well, the civil war in Myanmar is this longest civil war. Some ethnic group are fighting for almost 17 years since the independence of Burma from the British colonial. So they have gained a significant territory, but still there are lack of the proper support from the international community. If you compare with the Ukraine, how this country is gaining the support from especially the Western government. But all the Western government, they have been saying they are supporting the democratic reform, everything in Myanmar, but the practical support, we don't see any practical support except the sanction. Now, the Myanmar military conducting the airstrike, daily basic, killing the young children, the bombing the hospital, but still there are the European Union refusing to ban the supplying jet fuel, and the many other countries, they are, even they impose the sanction through the other means, they are still supplying the things the military need. So we need the willingness, the authentically genuine willingness from all the country to support this revolutionary force and this democratic force in Myanmar. Then we will gain back.
Maung Zarni, go ahead.
I think it's what's needed. It's not just simply more pressure and more sanctions and more Western support to turn Myanmar into a proxy theater for the Western interest. Is the unity among different armed organizations and public, and overcome our own internal bigotry and racism, and embrace Rohingya, and fight our own internal racism. And what happened, as you said, Andrea, the country is undergoing what I call internal balkanization process without external borders changing. So I think we need to get our house in order among the pro-democracy, pro-human rights forces, and that will be, within our power and without looking at external supporters and actors. That external supporters are going to pursue their own strategic and commercial interests, and
But
the
do you
Burmese
really
people have
envision
to come together.
opportunities for those pro-democratic forces you're speaking of, for those that want to accept, drop the racism in across the country? Do you really see that as an opportunity within the near future?
It is definitely a necessity, not just simply an opportunity. It is because internal racism, divisions, and fragmentation have been along ethnic and racial and the religious lines. That has been the Achilles heel for all the democratic movements since 1960s. And so I think that this is something that the pro-democracy and pro-autonomy forces have to really work on, and that we have to accept a responsibility among ourselves that the countries in this situation of divisive fragmentation, and the military is able to exploit these divisions, and China and India and others point to the military as as if it is the only unifying force that can hold the country together while the country is disintegrating internally.
Right. Maung Zarni, that will unfortunately have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. We are completely out of time, so I'd like to thank all three of you so much for being with me, and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.